World Mobile Token's been doing some awesome things in the development of their ecosystem and their telecom provider this year. Specifically, right now, they're putting a lot of new airnodes out in Reno, Nevada, and Africa's been growing. A lot of use cases out there. But the biggest question that's still in my mind when I see something like World Mobile Token trying to take over the telecom space is how does this compare to Starlink? And is World Mobile better or worse or compatible to something like Starlink? When I think of Starlink, I think of this giant company funded by Elon Musk with SpaceX and rockets and satellites and 100 satellites all around the world. Can World Mobile compete with something like that? That's a big question that sits in my mind. Starlink, in their unique internet service provider, is really, they're going up against the larger telecom industry. World Mobile is doing the same thing, but I think these two are doing it in a little bit different ways. And I think instead of being competitors, they might actually be working more together in the long run. Starlink is reaching a unconnected group in developing country or developed countries. So Starlink's main use case, it's a little bit more expensive than World Mobile and some other internet providers that are reaching the developed nation, but Starlink is really connecting those developed nations like America, Australia, the Netherlands, where people have a little bit more money, the infrastructure is a little bit developed out. But the rural communities like the mid-Nebraska or like down south Texas or west Texas or out in the outback in Australia, those people still don't have SMS ability, internet connections, and Starlink is providing that with their proprietary satellite system. Starlink doesn't have any people connecting like the infrastructure on the ground or maintaining any ground infrastructure. One, because they're just not built for it and they use satellites, but two, they don't really have ground infrastructure. I think they don't have ground infrastructure because they can utilize other internet service providers, but also because their business just isn't set up that way. So Starlink's main use case right now is they're a centralized company, they're a company for profit, but their main use case is to connect those people in developed nations who have a little bit more money to pay for their service, the Starlink service, but still want to be connected, right? They want to be connected to the larger grid. World Mobile's main use case is to connect those people in the developing nation who don't have as much money to spend on something like Starlink and need a more cost-effective and efficient model to service them. World Mobile is trying to do the same thing as Starlink by building a unique internet service provider that goes into all the places that the legacy systems cannot, but they want to do it in a fashion that's good for the user. So World Mobile is using what's called a shared economy, a decentralized shared economy, where people in these communities, these rural communities in America or rural communities in Africa or anywhere out in the east or in the south where there's just less internet connection, they can buy an airnode or build an airnode, connect their community to the World Mobile network, and then start using airnodes to get connectivity, link that to Earth nodes who are then processing their messages to the World Mobile chain, and then now all of a sudden everyone in their community can use the internet and can send text messages and make calls. So World Mobile is really connecting those 3 billion people that are unconnected currently. Starlink seems to be connecting people a little bit better than they are connected in rural places that have, in and out connectivity or just not 100% efficient and secure, consistent connectivity. World Mobile also has more legacy alignment because it's building its own ground infrastructure with air nodes, Aether nodes, Earth nodes, and their big blimps. They're building more ground infrastructure, but they're not having to take on the maintenance of it as much as something like a Starlink or a Verizon or a T-Mobile would have to. This is from their shared ecosystem, their shared community model, where the people buying and building the air nodes are going to maintain and take care of that. One, because the community needs it and the community can get behind doing a little bit of work to get some internet access, right? But also because the community or the owner of that airnode is going to get paid out in World Mobile token rewards that they can either change to their local currency or use to pay for more telecom service or use to build out their infrastructure. So World Mobile has a lot of incentives for people to maintain and take care of that infrastructure, whereas like Starlink is just putting a lot of satellites out in the sky and nobody can really touch those or interfere with those satellites, although they have the ability to pump a lot of satellites out very quickly and expand their network. Where both of these providers differ from the legacy internet service and telecom provider systems is that they are reaching these untapped markets and they're going to be able to connect to these legacy systems over time. I wouldn't be surprised if either one of these was bought out by a larger major corporation such as Verizon, AT&T, Boost Mobile, Virgin Mobile, or any of these other providers. These providers are so big and are doing business the old school way, to where they don't have the money to infiltrate these developing nations or unconnected people in the developed world, and so their services just cost too much to be able to put the wires and put the lines. I would not be surprised if larger internet service providers would buy something like a World Mobile or a Starlink, because no matter what happens, they will probably all end up working together. The goal of World Mobile and the goal of Starlink is to get these people onto the internet that are not currently on the internet. Then, when they're on the internet, there will definitely be a time where these people branch out to parts of the world like London or Chicago or Singapore or different parts of the internet where, all of these people around the world are connected via Virgin and AT&T and T-Mobile. So people will have to go from their World Mobile ISP or their Starlink ISP and connect to these other larger ISPs. World Mobile and Starlink are bringing people onto the internet, so then the larger ISPs can take advantage of that. It is my personal belief that the larger internet service providers will take note of that, will take note of how World Mobile and Starlink are connecting the unconnected, and how they're actually raising business for the AT&Ts, for the T-Mobiles, for the Verizons, by getting more people onto their lines, onto their network. So I think there's a potential future where we're watching World Mobile and Starlink work together with larger internet service providers. I also think there's a future where World Mobile can work with Starlink as a backup solution. So World Mobile has a lot of good ground infrastructure, but it's still going to need to be able to connect people to the larger internet service providers to get that data in that version of the internet that the larger internet service providers have, right? They have people, they have cell phones, they have internets that the developed and unconnected people want to connect to. And World Mobile can do that through Starlink by connecting from the World Mobile blockchain and their air nodes and their providers to Starlink satellites, and then down to Verizon or AT&T and other parts of the world. So I think there's a big solution where World Mobile actually uses Starlink to connect to the larger internet service space and telecom industry. The main question I wanted to ask in this video is, can World Mobile become the next Starlink? I think the answer really is, it already is the next Starlink. World Mobile and Starlink are two peas in a pod, where they are competitive rebels to the legacy internet service provider system. They're both doing things differently than AT&T, T-Mobile, Verizon, and Virgin Mobile, all of these big companies, and they're accessing places in the world that the bigger companies cannot. The bigger companies have lots of funds, they have lots of resources and lots of research and development that can go into providing some of these things, but yet they've still not accessed the undeveloped world. They haven't found a solid solution. Both Starlink and World Mobile have found two different solutions to this, where one's a little bit more cost effective because the community is running the nodes, and the other is a little bit more service effective, where people in developed nations would probably prefer to use a satellite to connect them, or just haven't really gotten into the blockchain space and the World Mobile space, and that is just reaching America currently. So the main answer to this is no, I don't think World Mobile is going to be the next Starlink. I think it already is the next Starlink, and I think World Mobile and Starlink are two of the exact same types of companies. They're trying to go up against larger internet service providers. Larger internet service providers will use their networks by connecting the unconnected to the rest of the world, right? It has to happen that way. And then Starlink and World Mobile, I think, could definitely be susceptible to being acquired or being a buyout to a larger ISP, so they can, if the proof of the model works. We see Starlink is a little bit more centralized because they own the satellites, they own the connections, they own all this stuff. World Mobile is a little bit more decentralized with the blockchain ethos because the community owns the nodes, owns the air nodes, and gets paid out in rewards, the shared ecosystem model. Both have pros and cons, both have use cases. Starlink is coming out with a direct-to-cell version of their platform. I know a lot of people in the World Mobile space say that Starlink can't do direct-to-cell, whereas World Mobile is specifically for direct-to-cell, like sitting in a coffee shop and working on a computer or a cell phone, right? But Starlink is coming out with a direct-to-cell service. The problem is the satellites. I think right now the technology is not as efficient in pushing lines of data through direct to cell, so you'll only be able to do SMS text messages with a direct to cell service. But I think people in rural America or rural Australia will really benefit from direct to cell from Starlink, basically turning their phone into a sat phone where it can send messages no matter where they are, whether they're off grid or kind of in their space where their internet's not. So I think both projects are doing well. If you like the video, please let us know down in the comments what you think about World Mobile and Starlink. Do you think I'm right here? Do you think these are compatible competitors that will end up using each other probably and using larger ISPs to get these unconnected people connected? Let us know down in the comments. I'd be curious to hear what you say. Also, in my description, I have my Twitter. I post Twitter threads on stuff like this way before I post YouTube videos to help me do my research. If you want the most up-to-date information or information on like what I'm investing in, why I'm investing in it, what my portfolio is looking like, join me on Twitter. I'd be happy to kind of show you what I'm doing or, show you some of the research that we got going on there. Other than that, hope you enjoyed the video and we will see you in the next one.